Last summer, my mother and I were face to face with a tiger shark. One of the most dangerous sharks in the world. We were on a trip to Hawaii and we joined a swimming with sharks tour where we got on a boat, went out to the middle of the ocean and jumped right into the water with all of the sharks that frequent that area. So naturally, this was an experience that came with its risks. I'm very passionate about marine biology, so I am aware of how the danger of sharks is often greatly exaggerated. You've probably heard some of these debunking myths before. The BBC says that we kill sharks way more often than they kill us. 10 million times more often. So why should we be scared of them? If anything, they should be scared of us. Sharks aren't monsters. They're just misunderstood animals. And while that's all true theoretically, if you told me to jump in the water with them, I'm not too sure about that. Because even though they're not killing machines, they're still apex predators. We would be going into their domain. They would hurt us if they really wanted to. Specifically, the tiger shark is listed by the International Shark Attack File as one of the top 3 most responsible sharks for killing people. And that's because they have this crazy tendency. They eat literally anything that they come across. Tiger sharks have been found eating car tires, a license plate in Louisiana, a Florida man's wallet, an entire chicken coop with the chickens inside. So, you know what that means. If they're eating all of those, they're eating us too. But when we went into this unusual circumstance, the way that we reacted between my mother and I were such polar opposites that it taught me a valuable lesson about the fear of the unknown. The way that my mother was thinking of sharks is basically the one from Jaws. She was thinking of the monster in the water with black eyes like a doll's eyes, coming after people, killing them, breaking boats, and making blood spill everywhere. And before we left the port, we had to sign a waiver. It was an agreement that said the company is actually not responsible if any accidents happen on this trip. So that didn't help her anxiety at all. But I was a lot more well-versed with sharks. I knew a lot of things that contributed to me feeling safe. The guard explained to us that we had to stay calm in the water. It was imperative to stay so calm. It was almost like I was a fish now. I was meant to be in the water with the sharks. And I knew why this was important. Sharks have a special organ called the ampullae of Lorenzini. And this senses electrical pulses in the water. If we're scared, our hearts are racing and each heartbeat emits tons of electricity into the water. The shark would know that I'm afraid. They also have something called the lateral line system. And this senses pressure changes. If I'm paddling quickly because I want to get out of there, the shark would know that I'm afraid. I also knew that being in large groups with scuba equipment is not good, because not only are oxygen tanks very loud and agitating, they also make these air bubbles that when they glisten in the sun, they look like the scales on a fish. And similarly, jewelry also looks like small fish when they grow. So the shark would be attracted. But we were looking great. We didn't have any of these boxes checked. We didn't have a large group with us. We didn't have jewelry because the guard told us to take them off. We also didn't have scuba equipment, and we would be extra calm when we went in the water. Finally, I had been reading about shark agnostic behavior, and this is how the shark uses body language to signal me that it's mad at me and doesn't want me there anymore. This meant that not only did I feel safe, I also had a way to indicate how well this interaction was actually playing out. But my mother had none of these. When we started swimming, our reactions were like complete opposites. I felt like I was meditating. It was so calming when the only thing I could see was the bright, lush blue color filling every corner of my vision. And when the sharks started appearing one by one, as you can see from my GoPro picture, they were so majestic. But my mother didn't share this sentiment. She thought that this was the peak of her fear, the climax that it would ever reach. But in reality, it wasn't the peak. It was only the midpoint, because something happened then that made her panic double. And that's when she looked down and realized there was a cut on her leg. She was in the water with these sharks, and there was blood. In reality, according to Harvard University, Sharks are not activated by human blood. This means that when they smell our blood, they don't think of it as food. But my mother was just thinking of all the movies when they detect a drop of blood and go on this crazy feeding frenzy, killing everything on sight. And she was so scared at that moment. She was so panicked. Her own body forgot how to swim. And she had to take a rest on the boat. One situation yielding two completely different responses. And I realized that this was because of the unknown. Fear of the unknown has always been a powerful motivator. The American horror writer who created Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft, famously stated that the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Fear of the unknown predators lurking in the bushes is what allowed our ancestors to stay alive. Fear of the unknown people that look, act, or think differently than I do is what led some of the worst atrocities in history. And now, in the modern day, fear of the unknown is lurking because it's responsible for most of our anxiety. But there's nothing more important for combating this than experience. When we're afraid and stressed, our brain's amygdala sends distress signals, and in extreme cases, it can hijack the rest of the brain, meaning that we no longer have access to rational thought. But if it recognizes familiarity, it no longer cuts it off entirely, and we can still make logical decisions. That's the key. But experience doesn't have to be direct. I had never swam with sharks before. You can also have knowledge of the subject that you acquired through learning, which is what I had with the sharks. Experience can even be habitual. Some people who are always worrying so much about little things in life, they might actually be really calm when disaster happens, because they're so used to coming up with solutions on the spot. It's almost like second nature. That's another kind of experience. The only problem here is that the sharks are scary. That's when something I call the comfort zone comes into play. When my mother dove into the water, all of it was like a huge, uncharted territory that was too difficult to explore. It was too overwhelming, too confusing, too scary. But I had something I could find comfort in the form of the knowledge I had. And this allowed me to see the area from my own comfort zone. It didn't seem so threatening. It didn't seem so frightening. And from there, I could slowly expand my horizons until eventually the entire area was familiar to me. Every time we enter an unusual circumstance, our composure and our esteem is going to go up or down. But what determines which way that goes is really the comfort zone. Fear is a natural part of our lives, but I believe it does not need to control us. If you approach fear with the correct experience and knowledge, it can be transformed into something far more productive. Fear can become growth, discovery, learning, realizing that our limits are far beyond what we possibly thought they could reach. All of us in this room are going to be afraid. We will be nervous. We will be anxious. We will be in unusual circumstances. But whenever that's the case, instead of turning and scrambling for the boat, I encourage you all to stay calm. Take a deep breath and dive in.